My wife and I went shopping for a new pair of shoes for my son, and I knelt down to see if they were going to fit. And I said to my wife, babe, I don't think these shoes are going to work. They're a little bit too big. And she said, no, they're perfect. He has room to grow. And I thought to myself, don't we all?
All right, guys, welcome back to the Brave Work Room to Grow podcast. We are in the middle of a leadership series, and today I have sitting with me the one and only Tim Schurrer. And I'm pumped. We have coffee, we have caffeine. He's got his shoes off. I just realized. Is that okay for me to say? Are you good with that? Do we need to edit it out? No, so he's comfortable. We're in my home, so like what better way to feel at home than to take your shoes off? We're going to be talking about the highs and lows and the habits of leaders. And one of the things I want to do, Tim, is dig in a little bit to your life, your journey, your story, and hopefully help our tribe feel there's some things in there that they could take and apply to their life, to their leadership. So we've got people who listen who are leading in their homes and their families. We got people who are doctors, they're leading medical teams. We've got people who are athletes. We've got all kinds of different people on the spectrum. But today it'd be cool to just deep dive a little bit into your story. So give everybody like a high level, here's some stuff I've done, here's some stuff I'm doing, and then we'll kind of dig in from there.
Well, I'll take you a little further back than maybe you're wanting me to, but there was a season of my life when I wanted to be the next John Mayer.
Oh my gosh.
I moved to Nashville when I was 21 to go to Belmont University. So my junior year of school, I go study music business thinking, okay, this is me learning more about essentially how to be a John Mayer type person. Let me learn the business side. But there were so many musicians, singer-songwriter, people I was inspired by and got me to Nashville. But been on this journey over the last 15 years. I'm no longer playing music.
Okay, I was going to ask you.
I haven't picked up a guitar for forever.
No.
But it doesn't make me sad. I actually just have gone through so many different pivots.
Yeah.
Went from trying to be a musician. I worked at Apple for 3 years and thought a new dream kind of emerged from that, thinking that I would be leading an Apple store.
Crazy.
And then ended up getting a job with Donald Miller and worked with Don for 10 years. Left that almost 2 years ago and launched into a new dream of being a writer and a speaker. I released a book last year.
Yes.
And then partially into that journey, I got asked like 6 months in to lead a nonprofit. So now I'm the CEO of a company called David Novak Leadership. And I'm on this wild journey that I never would have been able to piece together or attain. But it's just a sequence of events that's kind of led me to that. And then I have a wife that we've been married for, 2009, long time.
Whoa,
and then we have 2 kids.
Wow.
A 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. So I love my life and I'm just super grateful for all the different elements of it.
Okay, so true story for those of you listening, we met pretty recently, like a couple weeks ago, I think, and we hung out for the first time. I told my wife on the way back from a trip we were just on in the car, I said, this is a conversation I'm most excited to have than of anybody I've ever interviewed. And and I'm not dissing anybody else. I love all of you. But the reason is I've never sat with someone in such short time and felt that level of resonance with around success and meaning, following Jesus, business. Like I've never felt that. I've always, you feel, so you're like, oh, cool, you do that. And, oh, I know them too. And there's the commonalities, but not like down to the core. I was like, this is cool. So I told Adam, who obviously introduced us when I left, I was like, thank you. Like if I never hang out with that dude again, I'm a better dude from hanging out with Tim just for those, whatever, hour and a half we were there. And so I've been looking forward to this, and I'm honored that you would give us your time and your attention, and it's valuable. And so it means a lot to us. And so our tribe is trying to do brave work, and you've done a lot of brave work. You've written books, put out a lot of tools. You've spoken to a lot of cool companies. You've gotten to do a lot of things. And before I go too far, I want to make sure, just like my tribe listening, like I feel a level of, man, this dude's done a lot. Like he's done a lot of stuff. And I feel, you can quickly feel like, dang, I ain't done stuff like that. And so Was there ever a time in your journey where you felt like you were in a room full of people that have all done insane stuff and you're like, dang, I haven't done anything? How did you navigate that internally?
I still feel that way all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, every stage there's another opportunity to feel that way. And sometimes I'm pinching myself with the people that I interact with, but it's very easy to feel insecure in those moments. And what you then want to try, the temptation in that is when you're talking to somebody that you're really impressed by, is to make it about you.
That's right.
To show them that you have value and that you matter in that moment. And you try to impress them.
Flex. We call it flexing.
Yeah, you're trying to tell them about, it's like, I belong here. And I remember Don saying something a long time ago. He's like, insecure people talk about themselves.
Yeah.
Insecure people talk about others, you know? And so
I love that.
I still struggle with that. But what I try to be mindful of is this will show you even to the level that I'm still fighting with it. Last night, I'm preparing for my day, thinking about you and I sitting in my gratitude journal, I'm writing that tomorrow I make it about whoever is listening, not about me. And there is an invitation for us all in every single day, in every moment. Are we going to make it about us? Are we going to be insecure, try to show our worth, our value? Or can we actually put ourselves in the kind of headspace where we're more curious about somebody else? And I feel like when I'm doing that, I end up feeling better.
Yeah.
It just feels better.
It does feel better.
I don't really like how it feels when I notice myself trying to do the flexing or whatever. It's gross.
It is gross.
And it's so stupid, but I still find myself creeping into that often.
We all struggle with it. You wrote a book, The Secret Society of Success. I love the tagline, stop chasing the spotlight and learn to enjoy your work and life again. Before you wrote this, was there a moment that you're like, you look back now and you're like, I think that was the moment that made me start doing the research and thinking down this? Was there ever a moment, or is it just sort of like an overflow of life for you and learning?
The world that we live in says success is fame, money, power, step into the spotlight, climb the ladder, be the boss. That's what we're told success is. And to be successful, you have to have those things. And so I'm looking at my life and nobody knows my name. I don't have a social platform. I don't have this giant email list. People don't know who I am. And yet I felt very content. I felt like the work I was doing was meaningful. And this is when I was working with Dawn, is when I was writing this book.
Wow.
So I felt successful.
Right.
But everything that is being, all the cultural noise is telling me that I'm not. And I'm just like, wait, what? There's just something that's not right about that for me. And so I look around and I have a lot of other friends that are in a similar position to me. I love them as human beings. I feel like they're doing really meaningful work, helping make the world a better place in whatever field or, job that they're in. But if you try to define them by these cultural standards, they're not, quote, successful. And so the book originally was called The Shadow People.
Oh, wow.
And so kind of this idea of, you have the spotlight people and you have the shadows, and this is a book for the shadow people, the people behind the scenes that aren't getting credit or
I do love that.
for
I'm not
their
going to
work.
lie.
Yeah.
I do love that.
But then, I hear that books that have dark titles don't really sell very well.
I can feel that. I can feel the tone.
But the other thing I think that's really important that I learned through, discovery through that process was, it felt as when I was writing from that place, the shadow people and the spotlight people, it was almost that I was villainizing the spotlight. And the truth is, there is nothing wrong with the spotlight. The spotlight is not the problem.
That's good.
The person on the center of the stage is not the problem. What I have a problem with is when people try to tell me that's the only one path.
So
right?
good.
It's like if you go to a concert, right? There's somebody standing in the center of the stage,
John Mayer,
singing, John Mayer, right? So if we are all trying to be John Mayer in our lives, it's not going to work.
Wow.
Because you also need the person playing drums.
Yeah.
You need the person on the side of the stage running monitors for them.
Yeah.
You need the person taking the tickets. You need the usher walking you to your seat.
Yeah.
You need the person to clean up at the end of the night for the whole thing to work.
Wow.
So for me to try to say, don't be John Mayer, he's the problem. It's like, no, John Mayer is not the enemy.
Right.
It's the reality that we all are made to do a thing. We have a passion, we have purpose in our lives. And so what I'm trying to do is find the role that fits me. And I've just found that I love being behind the scenes. I love being the manager to the musician that kind of helped orchestrate everything that got everybody there. I love that part of it. And so that, I think, for me was the big moment that led me to ultimately write the book, because if society is saying success is only these things and that not really resonating with me, then the question I wanted all of us to ask is, what is success really? And the book is stories of people who I've been really inspired by that have shown me a new way to live and new ways to define success that maybe is counter to what culture is selling.
I love that. And you're working with David Novak.
Yeah.
Can you speak to a little bit about your work with him and how maybe you've witnessed him sort of define success in his life and in his work?
I didn't know David when I wrote this book, but he is a poster child of this idea. And so the Secret Society of Success is what I call this group of people. And David is a poster child because if there is a common denominator for him and the other people in this secret society, it's this idea, the way they show up, it's this idea of service, helping other people win. And you can be in the secret society whether you're in like an entry-level position or the CEO of a giant company. So David was the CEO of a giant company. So Yum Brands, KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut. At the time that David was the CEO, he had 1.5 million employees.
Wow.
1.5 million employees. It's insane.
Having one is like a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's a person.
Yeah. What about 1.5 million?
Good
It's
God.
insane. So he grew that business from $4 billion to $32 billion. But the way that he did it was by recognizing every person's contribution. And recognition was the number one behavior that he drove in the entire organization.
Wow.
And so David always talks to me about this idea of, leaders cast a shadow. Your people do what they see the leader doing. And so if David wanted recognition and, everyone counts to be kind of a core idea in the business, he knew he had to go first.
Wow.
So what he would do is try to catch people doing things right.
That's good.
And so he'd go, let's say he was visiting a KFC and there may be somebody like a cook in the back making the original recipe chicken. And he might, see them like, oh my gosh, this is an original, amazing original recipe. You're doing amazing work. He's like, I want to recognize you for, the part that you play in this company. I'm going to give you this little award. He'd write his name and like a nice little note on, I wish I had his personal recognition award, but just imagine for everybody listening, a giant pair of teeth with legs coming out. And he called them the walk the talk teeth. But anyways,
I love it.
So he would write a little piece of recognition and then he'd say, hey, I want to take a picture with you and put a picture on the wall in my office of you and me, because when people walk into the CEO's office at Yum, I want them to see that you're the kind of person who's making stuff happen around here.
Jeez.
So David drove recognition throughout the entire organization and let everybody know that it's not about David. It's actually every person's contribution that really makes things happen.
Where does that come from? Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's an idea I know you're comfortable sharing, but as I sit and listen, I'm like, this is pretty rare. Like, it's pretty rare that you find a leader of his caliber that's living like that, because you can't just turn that on like a switch and just be like, okay, I'm going to do that because that feels like a cool little tactic. It's like, no, that's a part of who he is as a human being. I've been watching a little bit of some of the How Leaders Lead content and podcast, and even just on his social media. And I'm just like, this is a dude who's probably built more, if I'm being really honest, and we're being honest, than most of the people he's interviewing. And yet he's interviewing them and he's asking them what they know. Where does that curiosity come from? Where does that kind of care come from, do you think?
He's known for building this culture of recognition. People know all the restaurants and the brand that, he led. But he has this new book that's coming out in the spring, and it's called How Leaders Learn. And it's talking about what I believe is his superpower, and it's learning. His desire to learn from all situations, from failure, from people, leaning into the ideas that the people on his team have. It's just this constant desire to learn. And it's why he's spending all of the time that he does right now interviewing really great leaders. He wants to learn from them and then take that learning and give it to other people. And so for me, I feel like that is what has been his key to success. It's that desire to learn. And he doesn't shut it off. I mean, he's 71.
Yeah. And I can sense it.
He's continuing to just grind
Yep.
in that way.
Yeah.
And it just makes him come alive. He loves it.
I love that, man. There's a lot of high points in your life and in your story, and I love talking about high points. I think they're beautiful, but I'd love to dive in a little bit to the pain of progress that you've experienced in your life. The pain of progressing into this reality, this book's reality, The Secret Society of Success, is like, how has this changed relationships for you in your life? Decisions, like we talk about it, like you're on a speakers bureau, like people can book you and all that kind of stuff. But you've made some decisions to be about family, about healthy rhythms and practices. What is some of the pain that's come with that? Like there's always fallout to good and bad decisions, right? Like what's been some of the difficulty that you've encountered as you've said, I'm going to step into this as a reality of serving others, not trying to just be a brand and build my thing as high up as I can. Like, has there been difficulty along the way for you?
If I look at other authors, speakers, and try to model my life in the ways that I see the really, quote, successful authors, if I try to model my life after theirs, what they're doing is they're speaking a bunch.
Right.
They have teams of people that are posting for them on social media. And there's just so much time that they're spending fully devoted to that, which is their business.
It's service still for them. Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's right.
But for me, I've been thinking about this for the last 15 years or more, even before I had kids. I've kind of always wanted to live a life that would allow me to go to a 4:00 basketball game if one of my kids had a 4:00 basketball game.
I love that.
And so in certain career decisions that I've made, the question I've asked myself is, can I do that and be at the 4:00 basketball game? This is all just an idea, right?
Yeah.
Like there is no 4:00 basketball game today.
But what if there was?
But there will be, right? Or maybe the 4:00 whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what I have given up is an opportunity maybe to go speak a lot more times than I am now because I just don't want to be away. And also, if I start to become that person, the guy who's speaking and traveling all the time, that may be really helpful on the author speaker side.
Right.
But I take some hits on the home side, and I'm just it's not worth it for me to do that.
Yeah.
But that is me. That is,
your journey,
I have a hard time even saying this out loud or even trying to in any way give this as advice because it's not the advice for everybody.
Yeah.
It's just for me personally, this is where I have landed. But what feels most important for me in that is, what is success really in all the different aspects of my life? And I've just determined that me being around at home and being able to drop my kids off at school, put them to bed, spend time with them in the mornings. Like that is all stuff that I really value. That is success to me. And so I've oriented my life around that. But there's also a fallout. And that is, you're not seeing my name as a keynote speaker on all these big events.
Yep.
And, I see friends speaking at the Global Leadership Summit or this John Maxwell event.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I just feel like if I wanted to do that, I believe that I could.
Right.
But I'm not. And there's a little bit of jealousy there when I see it.
Yep.
But then, at what cost, right?
That's
like
right.
there's a cost to everything. And so it's this constant wrestling of seeing what's possible, but then also looking at my own life and just trying to stay locked into my definition of success in this season.
Yeah.
And be okay with whatever comes from that. But if I get too far on the looking at everybody else, that's where I can really get into a tough spot.
Same. That's why I love having these conversations with you, because I feel so seen. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I'm not the only person who's like been wrestling with these things. We were talking about it downstairs before we came up. Is like, I think there's two sides of it, right? Like there's the side of I want to do meaningful work in the world, but I think what you're doing, and I'm just doing this in real time, so bear with me. It might be messy, but I think what you're doing by the life you're living is you're showing people that meaning and success can look different, and meaning and success can't just be viewed through the lens of dollars. Like there is a more robust, comprehensive way of looking at, and that money can be a part of it. It maybe needs to be a part of it because this is how we take care of our kids, and they have stability in schools and education and a home and heat in the winter and all of these things. But I love looking at your life going, I see you wrestling with, is my life about me feeling meaningful, or is it about me defining what meaning is and then living as though it's true? So there's a reorientation of like, I want to be successful and I want to do cool stuff, or as I like to say, dope stuff. I want to do dope stuff. But I love that you're not starting with, well, what do I feel? I feel I'm in my prime and I should be speaking, and I wrote a book, and Donald Miller wrote a foreword, and I should be out there at all these big summits and doing if you start there. So tell me a little bit about how have you learned, because we're going into feelings now. How have you learned to like lay down and surrender feelings in this journey? Not that they don't matter, they do matter, but how have you learned to observe them and go, okay, let me put that on the side for a second. What are my convictions? What are my values? Where did that come from in your life? Is that parents? Is that upbringing? Is that friends? Is that a mentor? Where does that come from?
Oh man.
I hope it's okay that I go here.
This is so great.
Okay.
I this last week, my wife, for our 6-year-old, put a feelings chart on the wall. It's the first time we've like had it out. So it's in his room. It's in like a room right off of our kitchen. And I was saying to him, hey buddy, I'm learning about feelings too right now.
Yeah.
Because here I am 37 and I
Same.
just have a whole conversation with my counselor around. He's like, okay, well, what are you feeling right now? And I have to look at the feelings chart and
Is it 8 feelings and sad,
actually
fear, anger, lonely? Yeah.
And so I am learning about feelings. Some of, maybe I'll answer this in a little bit of a different way, but as you're even asking the question, I'm thinking about, okay, I started working with David Novak and I thought I was on this path to kind of really go for it on the author speaker side.
Yeah, of course.
And then I get asked to lead this company.
Right.
Which is also an acknowledgement of what I thought I was going to be spending more of my time doing. I'm willing to give that up for this other opportunity.
Right.
And the way that I look at it is I have a unique chance to learn from David for as long as, he and I, like he'll have me working alongside him. I feel like I could spend the next 10 years learning from him.
Yeah.
And I look at my author thing like, well, you just write this book. You got to be out there doing the thing.
Pushing it, man.
and I've almost kind of slid a little bit more back into a behind the scenes role again. But I actually feel like it's the right thing for me. And so if I were to try to anticipate what's going to come 10 years from now, what is this going to do to my author, career, whatever.
My brand.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I'm not really that worried about it.
Yeah.
I just feel like this was the right decision for me right now. I am getting to learn so much from somebody that I really trust and respect. And I'm just comfortable enough to trust God in whatever is going to come, because I just have seen 15 years ago, I never would have been able to put myself in the position that I'm in.
Yeah.
But it's just taking that one next step.
Right.
And I feel like that's where I'm at right now. This is an act of trying to give up control, do the thing that I feel like is right in the moment, and then letting things play out in the way that they'll play out. But I love the work that I'm doing right now, and I love the book, and I get to sit here and do things like this, even where majority of my time is spent, in building this business. But it just feels right. And until it stops feeling right, I'm going to just keep, waking up every day and trying to put a little something on the plot on that.
There's a theme already developing in my conversations with CEOs and leaders around this idea, and you're saying it right now, it's actually blowing my mind, because I'm like, I didn't realize that was such a thing that we do as leaders. I say we like I do it. I don't know that I do, but I hope I do. I hope I get better at it. But you guys all seem to have this perspective of like, I make the best decisions I can with the data that is right now. Like I'm not wrestling through the future things that I don't yet feel or I haven't yet experienced. I'm going to make the best decision with right now, the season, my family, my wife, my kids. It's funny because presence is actually the best form of playing the long game. Like, and I think you do that so well. It's like being present is the best form of actually ending up somewhere you want to be in the end. But we think as a culture and as a society, we think like, okay, I'm going to think about 10 years from now. You hear a lot about like, where do you want to go? Reverse engineer it, and you're like, okay, 20 years, I want to look like this. I want to make this much money. I want to have all these things. And it's funny, the more I think about the future, I don't know if you feel this way, but I get more and more despondent and almost apathetic and tired. And my energy feels like it just drains the life right out of me. When I just think about today and the laundry list of things I have to do, like, life feels a lot more doable. It's like, okay, I can do that. As you think about this book in the context of teams, I would love to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about building a team. You have a podcast literally called Building a Winning Team. And so how does a team define success? Like when you start, you get a lot of, what do they call it? I was going to chiefs in the kitchen. I was going to say chiefs in the kitchen. I was like, oh yeah, I'm mixing two. That's so great. I love it. Let's go with that. When you get a lot of chiefs in the kitchen, how do you make a decision, such a weighty decision for a company, a business? We have a lot of people that lead teams on the podcast that listen in mental health spaces. I can think of a ton. How do you define success? Is that the role of leadership, or is that the role of the team to come to that conclusion?
I want to make sure that, and you and I talking about not getting too overly obsessed about what's to come in the future.
Yeah.
It could be perceived as like, there is no plan. I just show up every day and do it. It's like, no, there's a lot of strategy too.
That's good.
I mean, I have a direction, and yet I feel like each and every day you're kind of taking a step in that direction. So where I've learned some of this is, we're at the time you and I are recording, we're nearing the end of the year.
Yeah.
So we have our annual operating plan review. And we're looking at what are we going to do in the next year? And then, okay, here's some of the big goals.
Yep.
How are we going to break this down by quarter?
Right. What are the KPIs?
What project
Yep.
is going to be in what quarter? So there is a whole lot of strategy. And yet I've done this enough times to know that 6 months into the year, where we thought we would be and where we are is very different.
Yeah.
And that's because every day you're learning.
That's right.
And you're getting real-time feedback on what's working, what's not working, and making pivots. And so for me to try to say, here's what my life is going to look like 6 years from now, is just like, it's a little silly. It's fine to have like a vision, like I want to head in this direction.
Sure.
And yet you do have to just acknowledge the reality of every day moving you in a direction, and it might look a little bit different than maybe you had anticipated. But that's not to mean there wasn't a whole lot of strategy to even get you to where you're at.
That's right. I love that.
That for me is, I think, how you also lead a team through some of this is, I am very much a leader and believe in this leadership philosophy of, David, this is the name of his book, Taking People With You.
Oof, it's good. And
David wrote this book. I love it. Definitely one I would recommend everyone to read. So Taking People With You is this idea that you can't make big things happen by yourself.
So true.
So leaders, it's good to have here's where I think we want to go. Like this is where I'm seeing the future, but then to sit down with the team and say, what do you think? Like, how have you been thinking about this? And letting people speak into the vision, form the vision. And then when you get everyone aligned, you start moving forward. David always says, no involvement, no commitment. So if you don't get people on board with the vision and participating in it, they're not going to be bought in to try to go out and execute it.
Wow.
And so when we're sitting down doing our annual operating plan review, well, I'm not just writing that and handing everybody the script. I'm actually throwing some ideas on the table, giving it to people, letting them sit with it, letting them bring their ideas. And you know what we end up with and what we end up executing is something that all of us created together.
So it's much more malleable. It's much more Play-Doh. For a leader listening, and I don't know if this is anybody listening, but maybe it is, who's going like, dude, I don't like that. I just want to like say this is what it is and this is what we're doing and this is what we're going after and get on board. What would your encouragement to them be to think about this philosophy, this way of doing things, of going, hey, yeah, you can have some loose sort of whatever, but like let people do a dance and kind of see where it ends. Maybe it'll go better. Like, what would your encouragement to nudge them back to like, no, try this way of doing things?
Just what I would say is, okay, think back to the last time that somebody said that to you.
Ugh.
How did that feel?
Terrible, I'm sure.
And how bought in were you on actually doing what they told you and demanded, you know, that you do? It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. So I'm throwing a lot of like Davidisms at you, but I think this is just
I love them.
It's proof of how much I am being shaped by him each and every day. He says, you take the joy of the decision away from somebody, you take the joy of the job away.
Oof.
Take the joy of the decision away from somebody, you take the joy of the job away from somebody. So,
man,
you may have a vision for how this all should look.
Yep.
But if you're the only one making every single decision, I think you're going to be leading a team that might not be with you for very long because they're not able to do the thing that they, you know, are really great at and make some decisions and feel like an owner.
Yes.
And that's something that I see in really great leaders, is this kind of, it's an empowerment of other people to play their role.
I love that.
And to do that, you know, with excellence.
I love that. What are some of the habits you found in your research that you find in highly successful people? What are some of the things that highly successful people do, whether it's morning routines, nighttime routines, they brush their teeth a certain amount of times? Like, I don't know. What are some of those habits that you came across?
One of my favorite ideas is something that I learned from LeBron James.
Oh yeah, totally. That's not a name drop at all. You know what I mean? Like,
it's not like I sat down and was talking with him learned this.
Let's start smaller, Tim. Can we start smaller? Like somebody just, you know, local, you know what I mean? Like our coffee barista.
So LeBron and the Lakers won the NBA Finals in 2020. And so LeBron's one of the greatest basketball players to have ever lived.
Yes.
But what I found to be interesting in 2020 is LeBron was not the scoring leader in the NBA, which somebody of his caliber, you would think that would be the goal.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan was a scoring leader 10 out of the 12 years that he played in the NBA.
Wow.
In 2020, LeBron was not even in the top 5.
Wow.
But in 2020, LeBron led the league in assists. So the way that he chose to play, and then ultimately how he and his team won, was by him setting other people up to score.
I love that.
So what if success is in the assist? When was the last time that you helped somebody else win without thinking about how it's going to serve your agenda? Because I think that for a lot of us, we're only willing to really come alongside somebody if in the end we win.
Right.
But are you comfortable setting somebody else up to win, whether or not you get anything in return? And that is what I have seen in really great leaders, is they are helping other people get ahead. We just did this interview with Brian Niccol. Brian is the CEO of Chipotle. And in this interview, Brian is praising David for all of the things that he learned from him while Brian was the CEO of Taco Bell. He had worked with David for several years.
Wow.
And David helped groom him and, develop him into the leader that he is.
Wow.
He was one of the voices in his life.
Yeah.
And now he's on to, lead another big company, and he's now the CEO.
Jeez.
And so there are, I think right now, 26 CEOs of public companies that worked with David that have now gone on to, lead large organizations. But David doesn't look at that as anything but an encouragement, because he's helping other people win. And he's so humble too, that when people go on and on about him on the podcast, those are often moments that we edit out of the conversation because it's not about him. And so I just love that. That is what I see in really great leaders. And then what that does is Brian Niccol, he sees how impactful another leader investing into him. He's able to see the impact that had in his life.
Yep.
So guess what he does? Now he's trying to do the same thing for other people. But the same is true. Carol Tomei is the CEO of UPS. She came up through Home Depot. And Home Depot is actually an example that I offer in the book, because they have, if you Google Home Depot inverted pyramid, you'll see a visual of this. But they've taken their org chart and flipped it upside down. So usually it's, a traditional triangle, right? Where the long side is on the bottom, the point at the top.
Yeah.
If you look at an org chart, usually it's the CEO at the top and then,
down.
On down.
Yeah.
But the Home Depot looks at it as you have the CEO at the bottom in support of everyone else in the organization.
Wow.
So Carol Tomei is now, the CEO of 450,000 employees at UPS, but she came up through Home Depot. And I believe one of the places where she learned what this kind of leadership looks like. But Carol talks about, as a leader, you have to develop your people. And for her, it is personal.
Yes. Yeah.
And so
wow,
that's a long answer to say
I love that.
The leaders that I've been really inspired by and continue to be inspired by, even in positions of influence, power, they are helping other people win. They are looking at success as, success in the assist.
Wow. I just feel like there's so much gold in there. I was, when you're logging the conversation, like go back to that. And I'd be like, there's 7 things. That would be our whole time if we went back to all of them. I'd love to take that idea and go, how do we, and I know this might be a little left field, but how do we do this with our children? How do we train and teach? I mean, the Bible talks about like train your child in the way that they should go. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Am I training? Like, am I training or am I just telling them what to do? It's like, I want to teach my children how to make good decisions. I want to teach my children how to be lovers of people. I want to teach my children how to think about service, even in their sports teams, even while they're thinking about winning. How do they bring the team along with them? How do they bring out the best in the people around them? How do we do this with our kids? How have you found to do this with your kids? 8 Feelings is a great place to start. I'll tell you that right now, is getting them connected to their own hearts. But what does that look like with parenting for you and your wife?
I'm so young, so early in this. My kids are so young.
Yeah.
I'm looking to older, friends
Same.
that have older kids. John Acuff said something that has just really resonated with me. He says, if you want to have a kind 18-year-old, teach them kindness when they're 8 and give them 10 years to practice.
That's so good. Yeah.
And you could go down the list. If you want to have an 18-year-old or a 15-year-old that encourages people, teach them to encourage people when they're 5 and give them 10 years to practice. When they're 15, they've had a lot of practice,
Lots
right?
of practice.
So another big concept for me, one of the core values of my life is recognizing people. And why I just also feel like David and I have become fast friends is there's a whole chapter in my book on recognition, valuing every person's contribution. Well, come to find out, this guy's been doing this in business for 30 years, but recognition and valuing people has been such a key thing for me, especially as, we're going back to this idea of shadow people, right? You have all these people behind the scenes that often are not getting, recognized for the work that they do.
Yeah.
And so the way that I teach this to my kids is we are like regularly recognizing them, calling things out where I see them doing good things.
Wow.
Like, Judson, wow, buddy, you were really kind to that person. I love how politely you were, talking to that stranger, or wow, you are really kind. Like, you just walked up to that person that you didn't know and you asked them a question about them. Like, that's amazing when you actually are interested in other people. That's a really good thing to do because, I do this and also he does this. We'll just walk up and, his new favorite thing is, I'm 6.
I love it.
He just loves telling people he just had a birthday and he just wants to tell them all the things about him. But even just to recognize when he is asking, how's your day? What a great thing. So recognition is a part that we're, I guess, kind of trying to train them up in. But also just, I believe in this ability to make people smile and just to brighten people's day, to bring a level of joy that's genuine. And that I feel like is almost like this overflow. And he's got it. Elle, our 3-year-old, she's got it. Like, they are so kind and joyful.
I love
and
it.
so just letting them know that they can actually make a positive difference on other people by being kind. And we always tell them before they go to school, like, shine your light, so we're trying to do that. And I feel like if we do that at 6 and 3, I just am excited about what's going to happen, 10 years from now when they've had all that time to practice.
I love it. I love that you're taking principles that you're learning in life and business and you're not just letting them be business. Like, it's like, no, I want to aim this back into my home, these things that I'm learning. And so I hope if you're listening, you see the sort of cross-pollination that can happen where it's not just these great principles that can equal revenue and great relationships in the workplace and culture and great teams and defining success, but it's also a great way to shape the little hearts that we lead as parents. And so I hope that's a helpful tip for those of you listening. I want to talk a little bit as we kind of wind down around just your own, and maybe this is covered in the book as well, is just how leaders prioritize rest and replenishment. We live in such a culture of gas pedal, like get all gas, no brake, and often, like most leaders I see that end up crashing and burning or having addictions that spring up or manipulative with money or whatever the case might be, is like they've forgotten how to like pace the drive. And how have you learned in your personal life, or maybe through some of your research, how great leaders continue to do leadership over 18 holes, over a lifetime of leading? Are there some things you learned along the way?
I was driving to work one day, listening to a podcast, which I often do when I'm in the car. And I was listening to the sermon from a church in Minneapolis called Eagle Brook. And the pastor was talking about this idea, this concept that I had never heard of called sheep bloat. And so what he described, what I learned about sheep bloat that day.
The greatest phrase, isn't it? It's like
so
uncomfortable
gross.
to say.
Yeah.
You're like, oh God.
So I did not know this, but apparently if sheep are left to their own wants and desires will eat so much that they become sick and can even die.
Wow.
And so you would think in sheep bloat that they would perhaps be eating things that weren't good for them, but sheep bloat is actually, this is like green pastures, right?
Wow. Healthy stuff.
All good things coming in. And so what the shepherd's job is not only to take the sheep to, grazing ground to grazing ground, but it's also to know when they've had enough.
Wow.
And he will actually like lay them down when they to basically keep them from dying, from hurting themselves.
Wow.
And he's talking about this, but I'm just thinking how relevant this is to our lives. Because we look all around us, there are green pastures everywhere.
Opportunity.
Right?
Yeah.
You can go and do and be and create, and you can never stop. And so the question that the pastor asked this day was, so will you lie down or will you be forced to lie down? So when is enough enough? When can you actually feel satisfied, content? Or are you kind of constantly in this never-ending drive for the next thing? And it's hard to talk about this because I think sometimes people think that to live in this way means you can't have drive and ambition. And, to be in the secret society is not to be void of ambition.
Right.
That's not it at all.
That won't do much.
But I just feel like it's having a healthy balance between contentment and ambition. Like you can be ambitious, but you also got to keep it in check. So when he's talking about sheep bloat, he also then talks about how this is really comes to life in a very famous psalm. Like, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. So that is also our opportunity to look at our lives and say, am I actually overeating here to the point to where I am heading towards a crash? Do I need to maybe slow myself down, lie down myself? Or is it going to take health failure, relationship, failure, a hard conversation with somebody that you love? Is it going to take that to kind of wake you up? Or are you able to, be self-aware enough to realize that, maybe you're overdoing it a little bit?
So good, man. I feel like this is a part of the conversation that I wanted to lean into specifically with you, because you're at this intersection that is so rare. I talk to people who are very heady, very business, amazing skill, talent, vision. I mean, all of it. And then I talk to people who are like just Jesus followers. They drip Jesus, it's like they're just super spiritual and it's beautiful. And both are beautiful. But it's rare that I talk to somebody who lives in this sort of intersection of faith, business, meaning, parenting. Like, it's such a rare thing. Maybe you're around more people than me. Probably you are. I'm super introverted, so you definitely are. But I'm curious for those listening, how do you, and again, I'm wrestling through this in real time, but how do you, what would be the way to say this? How do you handle the polarity, the tension of, I want to follow Jesus, and yet the world tells me that ambition is sort of the marker of success. Like, you stay hungry, you get what is yours, you drive, you push, you don't become LeBron James without insane amounts of ambition and focus and work. And it's like, at what point do we, how do we reconcile these tensions of we have a Savior who is very ambitious. He was very driven for others. He was very driven to do his Father's will.
Yep.
And yet we live in a world that's it's about you. It's go get it, dude. What are you waiting for? And even Christians, I found that it's seeped in heavily into Christianity, this idea of build, grow, it's for God. And it's it's for God that I burn out my marriage and my mind and my body, and I don't have time for anything. I have no margin. I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off. I'm hemorrhaging in most areas of my life, if I'm being honest. But then I get on stage, I flip on the thing because I'm out here working for God. And I have struggled with this internally on my own journey, which led to kind of awareness around my own journey of like, oh my gosh, I have so many unhealed hurts, unresolved issues, unmet needs. And they're kind of the well at which I'm sourcing my whole life. The feelings is what helped me get there. So good luck with that. I know that there's people listening who listen to our podcast and they're going, I know I have room to grow, but I tend to live into the ambition and not a whole lot of surrender, which we were talking about downstairs. How do you reconcile those two ideas? Do amazing things, create awesome things, serve people. That's awesome. But Christianity that's going like, yeah, and do it. You're doing it for God. So you should almost be like more intense than LeBron, you know, and go harder. This is your one and only life. I've seen this like tear apart marriages and families. I have literally like a Polaroid picture booklet going through my head of families that are hurting and wounded from one of the spouse, you know, one of them or both of them, the parents going like, it's for God, dude. We got to go. And it's like this mission almost becomes more important than our health. How do you handle the tension of all those things? And you don't have to answer it like robustly for everybody's situation, but maybe how have you handled it for your own life of like, no, maybe pace is what Jesus was after. You know, you maybe healthier rhythms, maybe defining success before you get into the game so you don't just become another person that's getting kicked around and fluttered around with. I don't know. How do you wrestle with that in your own life?
I was tour managing, filling in one weekend for Dave Barnes. And we're sitting in a 15-passenger van. Everyone's in the back and he and I are in the front seat. And I don't know how we started talking about this, but that Psalm 37:4, delight in the Lord, he will give you the desires of your heart. And I'm, hearing that verse and I'm like, I'm getting a Mini Cooper.
Yeah, 100%.
And a puppy.
I love it.
These were the things that were on my, dream list.
Totally.
I wanted a house, a puppy, and a Mini Cooper.
I love it.
And Dave kind of was like chuckling. He's like, I've just never really read the verse that way. Like, it's not whatever your heart desires is what you.
Right.
It's delight in the Lord. He will give you the desires. So God gives you the desires.
That's good.
Right?
I love that.
And so what I have been trying to do in my adult life is to pay attention to the desires that are kind of like coming and going in my life, and then make the best decision based on that reality. Okay, so here's some examples. Had this dream to be a musician, leaned in fully to that, was really going for it. But then all of a sudden, there's just this tension that I started to feel that I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I wasn't trying to become John Mayer so that I would help a lot of people. Sure. I just wanted to be famous.
Yeah.
That's a pretty empty aspiration.
Pursuit, yeah.
Right? So I started, then my wife and I got married, and she's stepping into 2 years of grad school. Our plan was, let me go get a job where I'm home that is consistent in terms of income. And then when she gets done with grad school, we'll be able to kind of go back to this passion again. So I started working at Apple. Something really interesting happens. My desire to want to travel and be a musician, all that, like started to fade, which was strange because for so long it was so strong. All of a sudden this new dream, this new desire emerged, which is I'm going to run an Apple store by the time I'm 30. So I start heading in that direction.
Wow.
But then I'm realizing, well, to survive in that environment, it's nights, weekends, and as
Holidays,
I'm thinking about wanting to have a family, that just doesn't really feel like the third year in a row that I flew home on Christmas Day so I could be at work on the 26th is when I started to realize like this is not going to be it. So then I am realizing, okay, this dream of Apple is starting to fade. And then another, desire emerges. And, I could keep going, but Okay, then now all of a sudden, a desire to write a book. But I didn't want to write a book thinking that this was going to lead me into a big time career pivot. It's just, I feel this desire. And I believe that those desires, the ones that are like check yourself, right? But these things that I was feeling passionate around, the work that I was getting to do, that I believe was coming from God, him showing me a path for my life, the way that I could, start to head in some kind of direction. And so I just feel like I've constantly been looking and paying attention to those desires. And that's where I've been able to make some of those pivots.
I love that.
But what I feel like I'm trying not to do is to filter everything through, is this going to help me have a platform? Because that's also where the tension for me really comes, is this external noise, even something that you and I talked about right from the beginning. It's, what is success? Is success fame, money, power? Is it, me being the keynote speaker at Global Leadership Summit? Okay, I'm going to abandon everything and go do it. It's like, well, if it's not working for all the parts of your life, then it's probably not working. So if me going and being really successful from a career standpoint is also going to cause some big time hits for my family, then I have just decided that there are other ambitions that I can go chase. There is not this only one path. And I just want to believe that like God is about wholeness and health. I don't think that God's going to give me this desire that's going to wreck my family. I just don't think that God works that way.
Good.
So what do you do with that? And I can't really give a prescription for everybody, but for me, I think the easiest way for me to try to describe how that's worked in my life is, delight in the Lord, he will give you the desires of your heart. Acknowledge that the desires change in seasons of your life, and what you are feeling today, what success is for you today may be very different 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So look at where you are. Look at every aspect of your life. Ask yourself, what is success? Make sure that definition is rooted in some truth and not so influenced by what culture is, trying to pressure you into. But if you are living that way, I just believe that the right things will happen.
That's great.
For you.
Yeah. I love that, man. Good Lord, that's so good. I just wanted to throw the table. I didn't for your sake. I kind of have one final thought, and I want to kind of end here. For somebody listening and they're like, man, I'm not really a Jesus follower. I don't really get down with that. I subscribe to some other form of belief, or maybe not a believer on anything. What would you say to them for you has been the most provocative, interesting part of who Jesus is and what he represents when it comes specifically when it comes to success? Why do you follow Jesus? And what do you think that is so interesting that it's compelling you to be like, I want to keep modeling my life after this man who lived in the Middle East and was here thousands of years ago, and I'm so interested in following him for this reason, especially around wholeness, success. What does that mean to you?
The thing about Jesus that I feel like also comes through in this book, even though I wrote it in a pretty faith neutral way, is there's no denying this this kind of underlying foundation of service. And when I look at the people that I've been really inspired by, whether or not they are people of faith, what I see in them, the goodness that I see in them, what I believe all good, comes from God, the goodness I see in them is that humility and that wanting to help other people.
Yeah.
And so that to me is wildly provocative.
Yes.
Because from the moment you are born, you cry when you have a need.
That's right.
Right? When you grow older, it's the toy's mine, right? Everything is about you. And if we don't watch ourselves, swimming downstream is continuing to make everything about you.
That's right.
But swimming upstream looks more like helping somebody else, setting aside our own desires, giving up the control and the power to actually help somebody without expecting anything in return,
Wow.
or needing or having any kind of anything at the end of that. So that is, to me, the way that I'm trying to live my life, but it's also wildly challenging.
Yeah.
How can I set aside, all of my ambitions and be comfortable kind of helping somebody else win? And, that's definitely a Jesus idea.
So
and
good.
it's one that I feel like if we do that, that to me is kind of us on a better path.
I love that, man. And you just described the essence of our community and what we've been dedicated to giving our lives to at Brave Work, which is, the definition, I think I shared it with you over coffee. The definition of living a brave life to us is the continual act of emptying ourselves to see what is worth being and doing. And you literally just described that. It's like, I'm going to keep laying my desires down and letting him inform what I really want and what I really need in the end. And along the way, I'm going to serve a lot of people and love a lot of people. It's so countercultural. So I know it for us, like we talk about this a lot and we're sifting through it a lot, but I'm hoping that a lot of our tribe, for them, they're seeing a different path maybe for the first time, because we hear service and culture all the time, but it's service so I can get money, and it's service so I can measure my own worth and value. And you just gave us such a beautiful picture of what it means to serve without expectation and without need. And our faith so informs that, because if Jesus is truly giving us all that we need, if he's truly filled me, if he truly is my definition of success, then I can go serve from a place of not from lack, but of overflow, of like, he's already told me who I am. I don't need it in what I do. And I think it's modeled in your work. You write a book and it's like, you could be on the touring circuit. You could be gone every weekend, every week. You could be on every podcast, and yet you're building something for others, for leaders, along with David and the team. And so I'd love to can you let people know like a little bit more about your podcast, or where they can kind of follow you and connect with you? And it feels weird at the end of a podcast to kind of end there, because we're just like, no, it's not about us. Like, we just want to serve. But I love your heart, and I want more of our tribe to connect with what you're doing.
So I read the audiobook of my book. So if you're an Audible person,
I love that.
Search, The Secret Society of Success. I'll read it to you.
I love it.
We'll have some fun.
It's cool.
So that is one place, but also I work with David on this podcast each and every week called How Leaders Lead. And there's some of my favorite conversations, and the people that we try to pull in are ones that show up in and they show up as leaders in the kind of way that we would say to others, live like this, lead like this.
Yeah, I love that.
And so another one episode in particular to search for is search How Leaders Lead, Alan Mulally. He's one of my favorite people. Alan led the turnaround at Ford. So in 2006, Ford was preparing to post a $17 billion loss. Oof. 2 years later, they posted a $9 billion profit. And it's because Alan steps in to lead the team, and Alan says to serve is to live.
Come on.
So he leads that way, and you'll get to kind of hear the whole story. But this is also to show that showing up this way actually can also be a way that you drive massive success in your business.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think is so inspiring is sometimes when you do the right thing, the right things do happen.
That's right.
And you get the kind of results that, everyone else would look at and say, that's great.
Yeah.
And so Alan, turning Ford around, living like this is an inspiration for me. So yeah, How Leaders Lead, Alan Mulally. He's a great one. That's a really fun way to check in with all the work that we're doing each and every week on that podcast.
I love it. The podcast is amazing. The Secret Society of Success, go buy it. I'm not saying that just because I'm holding one or just because Tim's here. I would tell you that, go buy it, go get it. There's so much gold in there, so much hard work in there, and it's going to benefit your life. Tim, thanks for being on, man. Thanks for hanging. Thanks for giving me your time. And I hope we get to do this again. And I still love that your shoes are off, and it's like you're ready to hang out and watch a movie. I feel like we should just go eat popcorn now. It's like at 11 o'clock. I don't know. But thank you, man.
Absolutely.
Room to grow.